What a gaffe. What a gaffe. I'm not even on screen. I'm not sure what everybody actually heard in regards to that. I feel like I'm just sitting here talking to myself. That said, the Cavaliers finally just hired Kenny Atkinson to helm the ship in Cleveland. And like I said, I'm just gonna start off where I had it. I wrote this whole script out. So I'm gonna go ahead and kick it off again. Mike Nori, Chris Quinn, James Borrego, the aforementioned Atkinson, Johnny Bryant, Dave Yeager, Dave Adelman. It was an extensive list, and there was really nobody out there that truly actually just made sense to go out and was a no-brainer. So they took their time with this. And essentially what boiled down to was a two-man race. It was a two-man race between Borrego and Atkinson with new rumors propagating basically daily in regards to the top two candidates. And what we would see had one with a leg up over the other constantly. Those were the rumors. We would hear James Borrego is close to being hired. We would hear Atkinson is close to being hired. And I'm sure things got even more complicated upon the Lakers hiring of JJ Redick, who we know has no NBA experience whatsoever at the coaching level, who seemingly has mounds of basketball knowledge, but no doubt to his 15-year pro career. Ditto for the firing of Monty Williams over in Detroit, who now still owe Williams over $65 million to sit on the couch. And that is insane to me. They owe this man $65 million to sit on the couch. Just whoa. All of that, and the Cavs never truly wavered. They took their time and were patient in courting Atkinson. And for those of you who may not know, here's just a little breakdown of Atkinson's pro coaching career. He began at the assistant level, working as part of the Mike D'Antoni coaching staff way back during the 08-09 season, where he would remain until taking a one-year hiatus before latching on as an assistant with the Atlanta Hawks coaching staff under Mike. Now, after 3 seasons with the Hawks, each of which resulting in a top 4 seed or higher, and culminating with a 1 seeded finish during the 2014-2015 season, Atkinson was a top candidate for more than a few of the vacant positions during the 2016-17 offseason. The Nets wasted no time in bringing him to helm a franchise that needed a sense of direction, and it wasn't going to be easy. Boston had their first round picks in 2016 and 2018 with the right to swap if necessary in the 2017 draft. That shit stinks looking back at it now. That 2016 pick became newly crowned NBA champion and Finals MVP Jalen fucking Brown. That's what that pick turned into. The 2017 pick became Narkel Fultz, if I'm not mistaken, and the 2018 pick turned into Colin Sexton. All three of which are still making some noise in the league, and in the case of Brown, it's basically the new king of it, being the champion and all. Why am I telling you this? Well, yeah, I think it's important to provide you a depiction of the state of the Brooklyn Nets as a franchise at the point in time in which he was hired. Just quick rundown. The 2016-17 season, it was a doozy for the Nets as they would finish 20-62 with a roster with a ton of overlapping pieces. Their leading scorer that season was a 28-year-old Lopez who led the way with 20.5 points per game. Their second was a 27-year-old Bojan Bogdanovic. The roster just it has some interesting names, right? Jeremy Lin, Trevor Booker, a 23-year-old Spencer Dinwiddie, Rondé Hollis Jefferson, former Cavaliers Joe Harris, and the all-time bust that is Anthony Bennett. Quincy Acey was there. I mean, this was basically a who's who of random role players. No true star. They finished the 28th best offensive rating and 23rd in defensive rating that season. The following season, 2017-2018, things got a little better in year 2, I suppose, as Brooklyn would trade for the mercurial D'Angelo Russell during that offseason and drafted big man and current Cavalier Jarrett Allen. This also coincided with Joe Harris becoming one of the league's better three-point marksmen. Spencer Dinwiddie's game really started to show itself, and DeMarre Carroll contributed some really solid minutes as well. Now, don't get me wrong. They still sucked for the most part, but they did manage to win 28 games, which was an 8-game improvement on the prior year, as well as making a bit of a jump in terms of offensive and defensive rating, finishing 21st and 22nd, respectively, in those areas. And things were really starting to look up at that point. And the following season after that, 18-19, which was year 3 of the Atkinson era in Brooklyn, That's when things finally seemed to click. D'Angelo Russell turned in his first and only All-Star season to date, pacing the team in numerous categories, including points per game, assists, steals, games played, minutes per game, and a few other categories. His 21.1 points per game were a huge factor in him finishing as the runner-up for most improved player that season. Joe Harris would yet again prove to be a sharpshooter from distance. Spencer Dinwiddie worked magic off the bench, contributing 16.8 points per game. Jarrett Allen was facing was actually starting to show real signs of potential, and Karis LeVert, despite missing a large chunk of the season, would prove that he could be counted on to score in the playoffs, contributing a team-leading 21 points per game for Brooklyn. It culminated in a 42-20 record, which is a massive 14-game improvement upon the prior season, and which was good enough for the Eastern Conference's 7th seed. And typo there, 42 and 40 actually, giving them a date with the Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid led 76. And while they would lose in 5 games in that series, they fought and were resilient as can be. They took another leap in terms of efficiency, going from 21st and 22nd in offensive rating and defensive rating to 19th and 14th. Progress was seemingly being made. And then we move forward to the 2019 season, which is his final year with Brooklyn. It was supposed to be the year that the franchise finally took off, honestly. And in the offseason, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant joined forces to come to town. And while Durant was going to miss the year due to his injury suffered in the finals the season before, netting those two alone was a huge pickup. Of course, it would cost them the likes. It would cost them the likes of D'Angelo Russell. Is the audio off? Is the audio off? Let me check. Let me double check here. Okay, test, test. I don't know. Let me know. Let me know, Elias. I don't know. That my audio on my end, it seems to be working okay, but if it's not coming through too well, please let me know. That said, I'm looking at this here, and I love this signing, right? Not to get thrown off at all, but, the 2019-20 season, just to harken back to that, it was something that it was frustrating in numerous regards, I'm sure, if you are a Kenny Atkinson. Thank you, Buckeye being sports. That sometimes cuts out a bit. Okay. Alright, thanks. Thanks for letting me know. Alright, back to it, shall we? Okay, the 2019-20 season, right? You got Kyrie Irving, you got Kevin Durant. You had to move D'Angelo Russell in a separate transaction to make room for those 2, which it was worth it. It's seemingly worth it, right? But they would stumble out of the gate going 4-6 in the first 10 games and entered the All-Star break 3 games under 500 at 25 and 28. But they still had mounds of potential to work with. Spencer Dinwiddie took another leap, putting up a career best 20.6 points per game. Karras took another step as well. Ditto for Jarrett Allen and Joe Harris, despite not having Durant available basically at all. Kyrie managed to play just 20 games that season. Yes, just 20 games. And the Nets, they were remaining competitive. But despite all of that, it was announced mid-season that Kenny Atkinson and the Nets agreed to part ways and that Jacques Vaughn would be taken over. Now, to those of you who maybe weren't paying attention during that time, I remember it pretty vividly. It was a Saturday, March 20th, when that news came out. This actually followed a Friday night victory in which they managed to beat the Spurs, and it was being reported by some that some of the players wanted him gone, and basically that was Kyrie and Kevin Durant, right? Honestly, looking at it all, there were a lot of similarities in regards to the situation that Kenny Atkinson faced, and one that recently dismissed JB Bickerstaff faced in many regards. Both took over teams with bleak outlooks. Both weren't really working with any real draft capital, and both were hired under the assumption that they would be able to take a longer approach to developing things from the ground up. Tall order. Each man found success, albeit in different ways. Atkinson's offensive acumen far, and I mean far, exceeds that of Bickerstaff, and Bickerstaff coached the hell out of the defense for what it's worth. Atkinson's peak was the 2018-19 season, obviously, that saw him take a ragtag group of youngsters to the playoffs, seeing a 14-game improvement along the way. Bickerstaff was the 21-22 season that saw him take a team that finished with 22 wins the year prior to 44 the next. Each experienced the pressure of their franchise trading for a star or stars in the case of Atkinson, and were ultimately undone by the shifting timeline as well as their inability to adapt, right? And in the time since, Atkinson has spent time with the Los Angeles Clippers and most recently the Golden State Warriors as an assistant under Steve Kerr, where he won a title. That's on his resume. Honestly, when you look at it, it's been 4 long years since his first head coaching gig. And I think we all knew that he was ready for another opportunity. I'm glad he's in Cleveland. And while Borrego was honestly my first option, I'm okay. I am legitimately okay with this decision. He's stepping into a role with much more talent at his disposal than he probably ever had at any point in Brooklyn, Kyrie and Kevin Durant included. And I am genuinely excited to see what Atkinson can do with this group. His strengths as a coach are in the player development and offensive areas, right? From an X's and O's standpoint, Atkinson is known for his motion-based offense in which, he was big on pace and ball movement, 2 things that we have just pleaded for JB to do, right? Increase the pace. And while we saw a small bit of improvement in that regard, we still didn't see a ton of motion within this offense. In the Atkinson offense, the idea is to play with flow, play with pace, and create advantages that make the players on the floor more effective, right? The Nets finished in the top 10 in pace 3 out of the 4 seasons that he was there, and top 5 in three-point attempts in every single season. He emphasizes the 3 ball, something else that we have really, really been, pining for over the years. It's very, very motion strong. There are a lot of double stagger screens that free up shooters for good quality shots on the perimeter or drives inside, and when there isn't an immediate opening for a shot, it can flow directly into the high pick and roll, something the Cavs used tremendously or a ton during the JB Bickerstaff era. And due to the staggers, it can actually leave defenders off balance and out of position to guard the roller. I can already imagine the likes of Max Strus and Sam Merrill coming off of screens and knocking down triples. Is that not something that you guys can see too? I mean, I put a link in the description of this live pod to a breakdown of the Atkinson offense, and you can see everything that I'm talking about. I encourage you guys, honestly, I implore you guys to check that out because it'll give you a lot more information on the type of offense that he runs. And I think with some of the players that we have on our roster, I do honestly believe that it could work very, very well. Another interesting option that he has down there in that offense is to throw it down to the post while the staggers are occurring, which allows for the man in the post to hit the man on the move. That guy who would be coming around off of those stagger screens definitely be something that you could see Evan Mobley just becoming a better and better passer, and honestly, Jarrett Allen too, both of which could be utilized in that way. And so I think this hiring, it should be viewed in a good light. To those of you who wanted James Borrego, I understood the fascination with the offense that he ran there and with Charlotte and to a latter extent with the Pelicans, who he did help elevate their offense this past season. He would have been a worthy candidate as well. But when you look at what Atkinson at the core, what he was able to do in terms of player development with some of the young guys there in Brooklyn, that's what really sells me, right? For for a few seasons now, when we look at players like Evan Mobley, when we look at players like Darius Garland, or even Isaac Okoro for that matter, we have always questioned, "Hey, is JB and his staff actually developing these guys? What sort of emphasis do they put on developing, skills and new facets to guys' game?" With Evan Mobley probably being at the forefront of that. If you look at what Kenny was able to get out of D'Angelo Russell, who experienced probably the best season of his career, right? And if you're just strictly looking off of points per game, it's not gonna tell that story because in the years since, D'Angelo has obviously surpassed the 21.1 points per game that he had in that lone season in Brooklyn. But when you look at in terms of efficiency, when you look at the way that he was facilitating, when you look at the way that he was operating the offense there, that is something that Atkinson was able to get out of him. When you look at Karis LeVert, who experienced some of the best, some of the best times of his career in Brooklyn. That was Kenny Atkinson. When you look at what he was able to get out of a shooter like Joe Harris or Jabari Carroll, that was Kenny Atkinson in the offense that he ran there. Very, very motion heavy, very, 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 very dependent upon guys to set screens, right? And put some of these wings in position. And so I look at this hiring and I'm saying to myself, "You know what? We clamored and we were crying for a coach that actually emphasized offense as opposed to defense. This is a solid hire." And after Atkinson has been out of the head coaching ranks for the last 4 seasons, I think this is good, right? He got to sit on the sidelines with the Clippers and pick up a thing or 2 with Tyronn Lue and do much the same with the Golden State Warriors, who are very, very much so I think that this has the potential to pay off dividends. So, that being said, be it going on my long rant, long spiel here, time to hop into the comment section down here outside of my audio issues. Um Uriah Cruz asks, "What do you think comes next? Re-signings with our players or Donovan extension?" Now, to the people that I have talked to, the general sense is that Donovan Mitchell's extension is the biggest priority, right? That's not something that isn't common knowledge. Everybody knows that. But when that'll actually happen, I mean, I don't know. Donovan is in no rush make this thing go away, right? He has the ability to take a to take his time with this, right? Has the ability to take his time with this. His player option isn't until 2025, 26, and so he can ride this out for the remainder of the offseason if he wants to. We don't want that to be the outcome, but it could play out. It could play out much that way. Me Not You says, "Have you heard anything about Jimmy Buckets?" No, honestly, I don't think Jimmy's coming to town. I know there's a lot of rumors floating out around that, but based upon the front office's affinity with possibly keeping the core 4 together, I think that is the direction that we will most likely see. And here's the thing, if you're a fan of this team and you believe there are no real ways to upgrade the team without moving one of these core 4 pieces, you can't you are in a sense, you are correct, right? It depends upon what you deem an upgrade. Obviously, Jimmy Butler, bringing him in, that would be awesome, right? But it's gonna cost you a piece of the core, and at this point in time, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish in terms of an upgrade? Because in my mind, it is down to 2 positional groups. You need a 3rd big if you're going to keep Jarrett Allen. If you're gonna move Jarrett Allen, this is a completely different discussion. But assuming that they want to keep up or Jarrett Allen on the roster this year, if you decide that you want to get a 3rd big, you can do that via trading Darius Garland, possibly. If you're going to want to go the route of a wing, you're probably gonna have to trade Jarrett Allen, right? And this is the thing. It's so hard to determine or gauge the trade value that these guys have now because you're just hearing so many different rumors, and guys' value are down in the shitter right now, right? When you look at players like Darius Garland, public perception of him is way, way down in the gutter as it pertains to what it used to be, right? So in my eyes, you don't really have a lot of choices here. If you're going to retain the core 4, you don't really have a lot of hope in terms of a true upgrade at either a bigger wing or a 3rd big. It has to be in the draft or in free agency. And free agency, while there are some names out there, the Cavaliers are not a cap space team. They do not have a lot of cap space to work with. If they choose to extend Isaac Okoro, depending upon the very nature of that contract, they could be working with the taxpayers' mid-level exception rather than the full, I think, $12.9 million full mid-level. Don't quote me on that, I could be incorrect, but if I'm not mistaken, that mid-level exception depends heavily upon Isaac's next deal. So if he do that, you are heavily limited in terms of bringing in additional talent or, a true upgrade. That is not likely to happen. And so your only other faucet, if you're not intending to break up the core four, is the NBA draft, where the Cavaliers are slated to select 20th overall. My personal opinion is that if the Cavaliers are going to upgrade one of these positions, I believe that it's probably gonna end up being backup. You guys know how I feel about that position. I think that Deron Holmes, Tyler Smith, I know a lot of people like Kyle Filipowski. There are a couple of different couple of other names that really stand out that could potentially be upgrades or could potentially slot into that 3rd big position and fill a immediate need. But of the 2, I think that is the more realistic option because wings such as Tristan Da Silva, who I've fallen in love with in terms of evaluation, I think they're gonna be off the board. I think the real needle movers, the real upgrades, or the guys who could actually make a day 1 contribution, they're going to end up being gone. So I think your only real option is to grab a big, but that's just me. I know that a lot of other people would probably disagree with that, but that's just where I'm at. Now, in terms of this coaching, the hiring here, I think whoever they bring in is gonna be in a good spot because Atkinson has shown his ability to get the best out of young players. He has shown the ability to develop guys, and I think that is a piece, a component that had been missing for the entire JB Bickerstaff era. Now, we can sit here and say, "You know what? Under JB, Darius Garland experienced the best season of his career, the lone all-star year on his resume." And Jarrett Allen had a career of season as well and has had a couple of good seasons back to back now, really since he's been in Cleveland. But at the end of the day, how much of that was the player just expanding upon their game and JB actually getting that out of them? It's a hard damn thing to try and evaluate. The thing with Atkinson, though, is that he has sustained that level of player development over his years in Brooklyn. You could see it occurring in real time. Nobody was questioning whether or not he could develop young talent. The questions surrounding Kenny Atkinson at this point in time are not on the offensive end. They are not in terms of player development. They are in terms of can he coach talent, star level talent. In his first real opportunity to do so with Kevin Durant and with Kyrie Irving, it's basically not Kevin Durant because Kevin Durant didn't play at all, but Kyrie, we know Kyrie he can be out there at point in time, but in his first real opportunity to coach, like, star level talent, big egos, Kenny Atkinson either failed or was just not given enough of a rope line to try and get to where they wanted to go, right? So, it's hard to tell. That's the red flag on Kenny's resume right now. This is his 2nd head coaching opportunity within the NBA head coaching ranks. I think excuse me, I think under the scrutiny that was Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving over in Brooklyn and them not actually having a say in his hiring because he arrived before they did, I think we can kind of throw that out the window, honestly. I know that managing egos is a huge part of coaching, and I think that if you can get Donovan Mitchell to buy in, I think you're gonna be good. Now, what that buy-in looks like, I'm not sure. I think a lot of this is gonna have to do with, the offense, right? Running set offense because that's something that we constantly worried about with JB because it just kinda seemed like free form all the time or just spam high pick and roll. I think you can sell the players simply through your actions here. I think he is gonna ask for accountability. I think he is going to require these guys to actually, t play a part in the offense here, and I think he's gonna really get these guys sold on the idea of what he can bring to the table in terms of development. And so I think he's gonna push these guys similar to what Tunian says down here, and that's what they need. You have to push an Evan Mobley. You have to push a Darius Garland. You have to push an Isaac Okoro if he's still going to be around to continuously look to improve their games. And if it's one thing that we know, it's that Kenny Atkinson has shown the ability to do that. He has to earn the respect of these guys, but I think you can do that if you can get them to buy into the system that you're running. And I think that's exactly what's going to end up happening. This was the first major domino to fall. The next, hopefully, is Donovan Mitchell's contract extension. And obviously, we have the draft coming up, right, in just a few days. And as Frank says down here, there's not a lot of bad choices in the draft. 15 to 30 is pretty deep, in my opinion. Now, I know public perception of this current class is, like, all over the place. A lot of people feel that it is just a shitty draft. I don't necessarily think it's shitty, I just think it's not star-laden, but I do happen to believe there are a lot of potential role players and immediate contributors, in the latter stages of the first round, potentially. I think that when you look back at this draft, you could certainly be surprised about who ends up being the best player. It is definitely not a consensus type of draft where there's a consensus number one pick. There are guys out there that we know probably end up going top 5, like Alex Sarr and, Zachary Rische, but there are just so many different surprises that could occur within this draft. Tunis says, "If we don't get Holmes or De Silva, who would you like next, Mac?" For me, it boils down to Tyler Smith or Bub Carrington. I think those are the 2 names. It has constantly flipped with me, but I'm still very sold on the long-term potential of Tyler Smith because I do believe that the 3 ball is real, and I like the ability to block shots. I think he could be a potential rim deterrent, and the positional versatility. I think you can run him at the 3 in certain lineups. I think you can run him at the 4 and maybe get away with some small ball 5. And with Carrington, I think the appeal with him is being able to have yet another shot creator around, especially if you're gonna look to eventually move on from Karis LeVert at a certain point. So those are my guys right now. Things could certainly change, but, we'll have to see how the draft plays out. Guys could fall that we don't expect to fall, and maybe we'll luck out. Maybe we'll get a Cam Whitmore type of situation. Who knows? That would be awesome. Henrik says, "If Don takes another step in his game, would he be a top 7 player in the league?" Certainly, I think so. I think at a certain point this season, you could probably make a claim for Don being a top 10 player. He started out at, like, MVP pace, right? If you guys remember the early portion of the season, this man was playing the very best basketball of his career, right? And we know that he did that in the 2022-23 season. He took another step in, but he looked to be taking an MVP type step at the early portion of the 2023-24 season. And so if he takes another leap, who knows what that looks like? Maybe if they end up trading Darius Garland and they move Donovan Mitchell over to the point guard position full time, maybe you see him completely lean into the facilitator role, right? And maybe you see him take a take a step on the defensive end. Maybe that's what gets there. Maybe he turns into like a real two-way threat like he was at Louisville. Who knows what that next step could look like for Donovan Mitchell? He's already a pretty damn good player. But if he ends up doing that, yes, he could end up being a top 7 player. Frank says, "If we draft Carrington, do we keep CBJ?" And LeVert has to go in that case. I think you keep CBJ either way. I like the development that we saw out of him this season. There are obviously still areas of his game, like the perimeter shot, that still need work, but I like what I've seen enough for him to hold on to him for the foreseeable future. I know he's an undersized guard. He doesn't play like it. But yeah, I really wanna see what they do in this draft. We know that nobody wants another small guard. Honestly, I don't want a guard, period. But if we end up not being able to obtain De Silva, Holmes, or Smith, Carrington is fine with me, because I feel like there's enough there uh, to really get solid minutes out of him. I think that he could be a solid contributor within the Atkinson offense. Beast Girl says, "I'm just glad they finally got the right coach, so some of these people can shut the hell up, the ones that were complaining about how long." Hey, I was right there with you. So if you wanna I'm complaining right away with them too because I feel like this decision took a long time, but at the end of the day, I understood why it was taking so long. There were no surefire options this time around because the Mike Budenholzers, the world were already snatched up. And so, I understood why it took so long, but it still sucks that it did, especially when you're, like, right up against the wall that is the draft timeframe, which will be occurring very, very shortly. TuneIn says, "He definitely the best 2 guard, no question, and top 15 overall." Sold. Sold on that idea. And I guess a lot of that depends upon where you put people positionally, but, yeah, top 15 definitely for sure. Double J says, "I don't understand people saying that search was taking so long was from incompetence. We took our time and did our research. Seems like a good thing. Got them before the draft too." I completely agree with that sentiment. As frustrating as it was, as annoying as it was that this search took so long, especially when you saw other teams, like the Phoenix Suns or the Lakers or, the Detroit Pistons, uh, or not Detroit Pistons because they let go of Monty. I think I'm thinking of Washington. When we talk about other teams kind of expediting their processes and making it clear from the get-go that they had their guy, but Cleveland, it just took a little bit longer than everybody else, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, in my opinion, because you took your time to give a whole bunch of people an interview, you got the full layout of the land, and you went with who you felt was best for the position. Now, we were hearing that there was some, internal internal strife, right? Some people like Borrego, some people like Atkinson, but hey, I would have been fine with either one. I'm okay with the Atkinson hiring. I'm actually pretty excited about the potential of the offense that he runs. I really, really think that he can get a lot more out of players like Max Strus and Sam Merrill, and to a latter extent, Evan Mobley specifically. Beast Girl says, and the one guy that was on the radio yesterday, I'm gonna call his name out, Spencer Jarman, he sounded like a total asshole. I mean, I don't know. All I'm gonna say is I understood it either way. I think that, people we live in an impatient world now, obviously, everybody wants things to be done just like that at the snap of a finger, but that's just not how things work all the time. At the end of the day, though, I'm truly happy about this signing. I think that, Atkinson, again, if you haven't checked out the type of offense that he runs, the link for it is in the description, and I do believe that, he could get a lot out of these guys. I'm starting to see some more comments down here. Miles Westmoreland says, "Never heard of him. It's radio, nobody cares." TuneIn says, "So Borrego to Detroit, maybe." That's what it seems like. I think that's what will end up happening. I am Bryce Dolan says, "Do you think Garland or Allen or both are gone before next season?" Based upon what we have heard, I believe that they will be back. I believe that they still believe in the core four. My personal feelings on the matter are that I do want to see what a new voice, and that new voice we know now is Kenny Atkinson can get out of the core four. The problem still remains, right? Now, if you pay attention to the breakdown that I've included in the description, you will notice that the one thing that sticks out is the bigs, right? Brooklyn Nets' big situation was completely different than that of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Cavaliers do not have a true floor spacing big right now. Evan Mobley showed signs that he was improving in that area this year, but the volume is just not there to suggest that it's real just yet. I do believe a big step. I do believe Kenny Atkinson can assist in that, but it's not proven. Jarrett Allen is by no means a floor spacer either, and so you still have the same front court spacing issues. You still have the same backcourt size issues. You still have an undersized 3. And so the problems are still there. It's up to Kenny Atkinson to figure out a way around it. Or if there is no way around it, that will be up to Kobe Altman to figure out what deal makes the most sense. So to answer your question, I do believe that they will both be back. A lot can change between now and the start of the season, but The general feel right now is that they're probably going to do everything in their matter or everything in their power rather to acquire the upgrade that they need. The question is, how much and how much value do teams put in Jarrett Allen and Darius Garland? Because we know Donovan Mitchell, assuming he signs that extension, and, for that matter, Evan Mobley are basically as untouchable gets. And that's not to say that no player, is above being traded, but those 2 clearly of the players on the roster, those 2 are the ones that you probably don't look to move ever unless you are just completely blown away. So that leaves Darius and Allen as those 2 possible trade chips. But based upon what we've seen, some of the trades that have been rumored, I don't think they're going anywhere. I think people look at that Darius Garland contract and they see it as an albatross, and a detriment possibly. And while Jarrett Allen's contract is on a budget, Jarrett Allen clearly still has deficiencies in his game that not every team place a ton of value, or at least not enough value that the Cavaliers would feel comfortable enough moving him. They feel like they got a good return on investment. So, I think they'll be back. Double J also says, "I'm looking forward to how Kenny spaces the floor with the bigs. I think some of the motion offense can help space the floor even without Jarrett shooting." I believe it can too, but there's only so much you can do, right? Obviously, Jarrett has experience playing within the Atkinson offense, but things were structured much differently there in Brooklyn, from a roster perspective. And so I'm very interested to see what they're gonna end up doing. He also says, "Jay getting them involved with high pick and roll, Spain, and pin downs." Yeah, I mean, the high pick and roll is something that's been a part of this offense for a while. The pin downs are very, very, prevalent within that motion offense that he runs. We see a lot of staggers, a lot of double staggers, and a lot of transition offense. And I think that is something that really that just paying attention to what he was able to do there, the transition offense that he was able to generate could really benefit players like Isaac Okoro if he returns, Donovan Mitchell, we know he likes to get out and run, Jarrett Allen specifically. But one of the ways that Kenny was able to get a lot out of his guards there was to have them immediately run the ball off that fast break opportunity and move the ball around. And so I think that is something that could benefit this team, but we will see. I am Bryce Dolan says, "Wasn't Kenny Donovan's coach in Utah for a bit? So they have some chemistry already, I presume." Now, I don't think he was, right? I could be wrong about that. I think he started at the assistant level with D'Antoni. I think it was 08, 09, and then he was with the Hawks and then the Nets, right? And so, no, I don't think he actually has time working with Donovan in the NBA. Maybe abroad, but not the NBA. Tuna says Jarrett Allen can be offered an extension this year. Yeah, he is extension eligible. I mean, based upon what we have seen the offers be potentially for Isaiah Hartenstein, I don't know what teams would value Jarrett at, but I would have to think more because to me he's a tier above. We'll see. I don't know. I feel good about this. I hope you guys do too. As I always like to mention to you, if you'd like to throw a little bit of support podcast way, you know how you can become a member over on Patreon. I believe I included a link to that in the description. You can become a member for as low as $1 a month. Definitely helps the content creation, although I will continue to make this all the live long day, even if you guys don't. It's okay. If you'd like to reach out to me, you know how you can. It's Cavalier_pod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and more. If you want to be added to the Discord chat, leave a rating, leave a review, send a screenshot of said review to itcavalier53@gmail.com, and I will send you an invite. Thanks for listening, and also thanks for working with me in the some of the technical issues that I experienced at the start of the live pod. That said, give Kenny Atkinson a chance if you're skeptical. I do believe that this could be a very, very good signing. I need to be Emmanuel Crowley. That's funny. That said, go Cavs. Have a good one.